Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Should be able to see my screen here. Well, welcome to the open enrollment overview training for our Criterion learning series. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We do have a Q&A feature available. So if you'd like to ask questions, that's being monitored and we'll try to answer them in real time. If it's not answered during real time, what will happen is we will answer them, follow up with you through an email, or perhaps give you a call if you have a more in-depth question, and we will get all this answered for you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and switch to sharing my screen so you can see what's going on. And we are going to cover our open enrollment training today. All right, so you should be able to see this now, which is showing my employee self-service. Obviously, this is where people would actually go through open enrollment, but this is not where it actually is configured. So to see it and actually perform it, it's going to be under benefits. You'll see open enrollment right here. But I'm going to actually go and show the setup of it and how it will work on the backside of admin. And then we can go step through it real quickly on the self-service side. All right, so in the admin, there's a few things that you need to do to set up open enrollment. So first is, of course, you need to have your benefit plans configured in the system. Now, if this is an open enrollment, you've been using the system for a while, you perhaps already have your benefit plans already configured, and you can continue using them into next year, especially if you're not changing carriers on anything. Very easy to say, all right, the medical plan, the dental plan, et cetera, are carrying over from one plan year to the next, and perhaps you're just putting in new rates for those plans. Now, if you do have new plans, new carriers perhaps, or new options within those carriers, you'll need to configure those, and those can be done in different ways to configure those. So first off, a carrier is a required field in the system, as well as a benefit type. So those do need to be configured before you can set up a benefit plan. So let's talk about where those are configured. It doesn't matter which one you do first, carriers or benefit types, but they both need to be configured here. So I'm going to do carriers first just to talk about this very quickly, and you'll see an example here. I just have two carriers, but let me show you how you could set one up. Very simple, click add. You'll see the two required fields are a code and a name. So very simple as far as those. These other fields would be used if you have EDI files that we are sending to carriers. So sending the benefits information over to your carrier automatically on a scheduled basis. We need to have this information for most of those files. So that would be required there, but you would work with your implementer of that file to get that information in there. Now, what might happen is that information may possibly change from one plan year to the next, in which case you'll need to coordinate with your carrier. Perhaps you have a broker or something like that, or your carrier, they'll be able to tell you, maybe there's a policy number change or something like that. So this is where you would update it if there was a new update in there, but be aware that this may impact current files. So if there's any change on this, please reach out to your support person and let them know what's happening so we can coordinate all that to make sure it's done correctly. If you have any questions on that, right here in our help center, you'll have the email address and phone number to reach out to get some assistance on there. How would I set up a new one? Let's just say I have MetLife, and I'm not endorsing any carrier versus any other carrier, but simple as that: one code, one description. The code and description do not have to match. In my situation, they do match, but I can do whatever I like there. So I'll go ahead and just hit save here. And there you go. You can see my new code, my new name there. If I want to see an existing one, let's say Anthem, you'll see that. Very simple. All right, so that's the carriers and setting those up. Very, like I said, it could be very simple, but can have some complexity there if you do have EDI files. Now, where do we set up the benefit types? They're going to be down here under system configuration and code tables. Now, if you joined us on other training sessions, you'll know that you can type that into the filter menu up here. I could have done this for carriers as well. I just happened to be right there at the top of the screen, so I didn't, but I could type in a few letters, and you'll notice as I'm typing, it's searching and finding code tables. So whatever is the best way for you to do it, whatever you're most comfortable with, you can scroll down the menu, click on system configuration, and choose code tables. You could use the filter up there. Just be aware, if you do type in something like code here, then you're looking for something else, you have to clear it out first. That's the only thing you would need to do, you might say, well, why am I not seeing benefits? Well, you typed in code and benefits doesn't contain the word code. So where do you set up the benefit type here? It's a user code table, and you'll see benefit type. All right, I already have several configured in here, so you can see how this works here. Very similar to that carrier setup in that we have a code and a description. Again, I'll click add here just so you can see code and description. All right, now if you do have multiple languages, you can have those right here. So maybe you're in French or something, you can put in that French description there. If you're no longer going to be using a particular one of these types here, you could, let's say, maybe I'm not going to use retirement anymore. I can go ahead and say it's inactive. All right, but that's across the board for our code tables. You can make codes inactive. You can also set the default there. I'm not sure how useful that would be for benefit type, because this is really something that you see only in the setup of the plans. It's not something like the employees are going to select, where you might want to have a default for the employees in self-service or something. They'll never be selecting this code from a drop-down menu. So, that doesn't really be very helpful for you, but that's what that's for. Perhaps you are doing, most of your employees are all in one state or one province, and you wanted to have that as the default code when somebody's doing an address change or something like that, or putting their address in. You could set a default, or whatever it might be. You could set that default. That would be the one that would pre-populate in the drop-down menu, but not super useful in this situation. There, adding a new one or editing the existing ones, no problem there. You'll see here, for an example, perhaps I want to change this to say pension instead of retirement, or maybe I say retirement/pension. You see, like that. Very simple to do that. All right, now the other one I mentioned two, there's actually three. The other one is a deduction code. So there is a deduction code that's tied to benefits. Even if you're not using payroll, we still tie things to deduction code. So you would need to configure that. So let's go ahead and show how this would work here. I'm going to create a new deduction code just as an example here. So you'll see, again, there's just some default fields I have to fill in. This one has way more than a code table does, but I have to fill these in. So I'm just going to make one called example. As you can see here, now the deduction type, this won't matter for the benefits if you're not using payroll. So if you are just using this for HR and for benefits tracking and doesn't have any impact on payroll because you're not processing payroll in our system, you can do really whatever you want here. Now, if you wanted to be accurate, you may want to say, oh, this is a Section 125 plan for the United States, or it's a 401k or an RRSP or whatever it might be. You could put those in there to have accuracy if you would like to do that. But if you're not doing payroll and you don't really care about that, you could just choose insurance benefits or whatever might make sense to you. Same thing with pay type. This may have a significant impact with your payroll if you're actually processing payroll, but if you're not, you can choose whatever you like here. Regular, if you're doing payroll, means it's going to come out of and it's going to be taxed using the regular tax rate. So it's going to affect those types of things. You'll see here supplemental pays and custom as well there. System labels, again, this may have an impact for tax reporting. You may need to put a certain code on there to have it show up on the box 12 on the W-2 or on the T4 or something like that. You may need to put a label on it. That's what that would be used for. Again, you can reach out to support for questions on that. You would want to make sure it's active. That makes it available in the drop-down menu to select from. So make sure that is checked. Show cost. So if it's a employee cost only, you may want to just show the employee cost. If there's an employee and employer, you can do that. This has an impact on payroll. So you may want to show that on payroll to show both sides of it. If you just want to show the employee side, you can do that right there. Calculation method. Well, this is what is in there. Are they typing in a percentage? Is it going to be a dollar amount? So percentage of gross would be like for say a retirement plan, they're setting aside 10%. If there is a match, you might want to put that in there. Again, for payroll purposes, you do want to be accurate. For, if you're just doing HR, you can choose whatever you like there. Employee contribution method is employee only, employer only, or both. And then the last thing are down here, the frequency. Here's an example of a default. Mine defaults to biweekly. So this would be the frequency that is withheld for this deduction. That would need to be configured. And then what is the limit here? Typically, for most insurance benefits and things like that, there's not a limit, let's say, per year. But when I do get to maybe a retirement plan, I might have certain limits that apply. So for payroll purposes, you may want to put in a year, but otherwise you could do like no limit there. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now, again, if you do need to configure this for payroll, you have payroll, you want to make sure everything is right, please feel free to reach out to support and they can help you out with that. All right, so now that I have that configured, let's go back over to my benefits here. And you'll see the various benefit plans. Now, I'm not going to go and set up a benefit plan, but those are the things you need to do to set up a benefit plan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a plan and we're going to look at it and see how this all works. And you'll see why those things are there, because look, here's the code and description, just like other codes we just set up. Those are required. The carrier name is required. So that's why we had to set that up first. All right. An account number. So this is a required field. Even if you're not sending EDI files, we made it a required field because those who do have an EDI file, they have to send something in. If you're not using it, you can just put a 1 in there. You can type in random letters, numbers, whatever. Sometimes I would just do like 9999. It doesn't matter if you're not sending the EDI files, but maybe you want it there for, information purposes, because when you're talking to the carrier, maybe they ask for that. And so you may want to put it in there. The type. So this is, remember, we just set up those benefit types. That's where that goes right there. The year end date. So this is something that some people have questions on because they're saying, well, what happens at the end of the year? If I put down 12/31/20 as an example, what happens in 21 and 22 and going forward? Well, what will happen is this is the default end year. If you carry forward, it just becomes the end year. The 12/31 part becomes the end year. December 31st becomes the end of the year, but the year keeps incrementing. So if I was using this plan today, it would end on 12/31/22. And then, in a few months, it's going to be 12/31/23. So you can kind of ignore the date a little bit, but it could have an impact if you're not continuing forward. Then that would be used as the end date for, when it finishes, when the plan no longer is available, it would be 12/31/20 or whatever this date was there. All right, the rate field. So when we get to the rates, which is the very end here, what are we putting them in as? We're putting them in as monthly rates, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever the numbers are that we're going to put in here. And you'll see different options in here. So you may have an annual rate you want to put in, then the system breaks it down to a monthly or bi-weekly or whatever deduction. But it's just what rates are you putting in over here? All right, in my situation, I'm going to do monthly. Now, I've already configured it, but normally I would have a drop-down menu here where I'm selecting the deduction. That's why it's a required field. All right, we'll look at these check boxes here. So active means it's going to be active. It's continuing. It's active. This is it's eligible for COBRA. So when somebody retires or they are terminated, are they eligible for COBRA? It's an elective. So what that means is, do they have a choice for this plan, or is it not like maybe an auto enroll type situation? Are you self-insured? So if you're a self-insured company, you might want to check that box off there. Is this ACA for the United States? So for ACA reporting, is it part of a cafeteria plan where perhaps they get $1,500 and it all comes out and what maybe they owe whatever's over $1,500. All right, and then do we allow changes in ESS? Now, what that is, that's not for open enrollment. What that means is ongoing changes throughout the plan year. So for, let's say, a medical plan, you may not want them to change their benefits and add dependents and so forth in ESS. So you probably would leave that unchecked, probably, every time for a medical plan. But maybe you do have a plan where they can make a change. Let's say a retirement plan. They could change their amount they're going to contribute, and maybe they want to increase it or decrease it. So you may want to allow them to change that on there. And then you would set up a workflow to say, all right, if they change their 401k amount, it's going to go to this person for approval. All right, documents and forms. So if you would like them to fill out a form when they sign up for this, you may want to attach a form here. That's not required there. I'm not sure what that form is, so I'm just going to remove it because I don't know what that is there. And then document, if you want to have a document that's related to this, perhaps a plan document right there, and a description. You'll see it down here. These are not required. Well, the description is required fields, but you can see those right there as other fields down there if you want to put the contact information, perhaps a broker or carrier contact. All right, formulas. So depending on the plan, you may have some of these popular. You'll see the one that's required is the eligibility. So this allows you to write a formula to say who is eligible for this plan. Now, the basic one to say everyone's eligible is to type the word true here. So this means everybody's eligible, but you could put in here they need to be in a certain state or a certain job type or department or location or whatever the category might be to make that eligibility. Again, as mentioned before, going to reach out to support to get that because there are lots of different options that can go into here. These types of fields, as you can see, like at hire date, that could be some of eligibility. Perhaps they need to be an employee for a certain amount of time, something like that. There may be a formula that needs to be written, like you can see down here for contribution. This is the formula. Here's another formula. Those could be things that you need to do for eligibility. Now, coverages for a medical plan, you wouldn't typically have a coverage. That's more like for a, say, life insurance plan or a disability plan where they get a certain amount of coverage, $100,000 of coverage or a certain amount per month or something like that. For a medical plan, you probably leave those blank. The premium is the total cost of the plan. So in my situation, I have a formula here to look at what we call options, and we'll get to that. But there might be something here. Maybe it's a fixed amount. Maybe it's $500. So you might type that in. Again, reach out to support. If it's already configured, maybe you can read what's there and figure it out. We try to make this plain enough language, but it is obviously kind of sophisticated there. If you want to try to figure it out on your own, we do have everything documented in our help center. So you scroll down here and you'll see we talk about this screen here under formulas, and we talk about some examples there for eligibility and so forth. And then you'll see here examples are in there. All right, I'm going to move forward here. And here's an example of options. What this is when I go through open enrollment, I'm going to get some choices there for what am I doing. In this situation, I'm going to choose, am I covering my employee only, their spouse, their child, whatever it might be right here. Perhaps you have one where you're going to have them enter an amount, a 401k, they're going to type in a percentage or a dollar amount. So in which case you make it manual and you type in deduction amount or something like that as the label. You can have up to 4 options that you can set right there. And then finally, of course, not least, but is the rates. So you'll see here, now I have these older rates in here. That's not a big deal. I'm not going to bother setting these up for you, but what you'll see here is different rates that go along with this. So when I'm saying like employee only, you can see these rates that are associated with this. Employee with wellness must be a drop-down menu. Here are the different rates that are applying right there. This goes back to those options and the formulas. So you'll see here, the formula is this selection. And then this one says, okay, they're choosing wellness or not. So it's a complicated formula to how this all works. But this is just determining how much the rate is and then how much they're paying. Now, when you're going from one plan year to the next, what you probably would do is hit new rates. You'd put in when it was effective. So 1/1, let's say 23. This copies the existing rates. So as you see here, I now have, there's the old one, 2019. Here's a new one, 2023. It copies everything. So now I could just update it. So let's say this is now 150. Update that. This is, let's say 280. And I'm just going to update a couple more here. 300, let's say make this 345. And this one is now 400. All right. So very easy to update those. What you saw is as I was updating, I clicked the update button, that saves it. I do need to hit one more button down here for save. To do that, if I delete it like I did, you'll see it went away. I can add, I can also import as well. Let's go ahead and save that. All right, so now that I have those configured, and obviously you would go through every benefit plan for your enrollment. I'm not going to bother with that because obviously there could be a lot in there, and I only have another 10 minutes. So I've already set up an enrollment out here called Open Enrollment 2022, and I'm going to go through how this all works here. So when you create one of these, you can either copy an existing one if you already have one, maybe you just want to change the dates and something like that. You'll see a button when I go into an existing one called Clone. That'll allow me to copy that, and you'll see here, I can call it whatever I like, and then I can go in and edit that. I've already done that here. So the name of it, probably make it descriptive so you know what it is. You know, this is the open enrollment for 2022, or maybe say open enrollment 22, 23, something like that. Whatever makes sense to you, make it descriptive as far as that's there. Who's eligible for this? So I have an employee group called active employees. Those are the ones eligible. Perhaps this is one for a particular location or group of employees. You might want to have employees in Alabama. You know, that might be a group, and then this is the enrollment for them. All right, if you're doing a cafeteria plan, you could select that plan right here, and you would set that up. what is the balance for that, and that goes to a deduction. All right, so that's how that would work there. And then you'll see here the an income code, the date. So this is when somebody could actually go through open enrollment. I chose these dates because between the 1st and the 31st, but these are the dates that would be available for somebody to go through. After the 31st, the November 1st going forward, they're not gonna be able to click on this. They also wouldn't be able to click on it for September. So this is when it's available there. Here's when the benefits start. So they all start on 1/1/23. Down here, I have some text for what we're gonna see in open enrollment. I've already copied and pasted this in here, so you can kind of see how this all works. You could type whatever you want in here. You'll see these different things for formatting this. You could, what I did is I copied and pasted from Word, but you could do whatever you want. I find that's the easiest way, rather than trying to use the formatting in here. But you can see I could do images, I could have links, I could have videos. Those are all things I could put in here. You'll see different options for whatever you're doing there. If you actually want to type the HTML, you got somebody who's fancy with that, you could go ahead and click that, and there you go. You see the HTML. It's all very complicated. I'm going to go ahead and just click out of that. All right. So next is the announcement that you may want to go out to employees, letting them know about open enrollment or reminding them about open enrollment. Here are the steps. Now, the steps are the benefit types and the order that they're going to go through. So you can see what this is going to look like right here. I've got health first, which is that benefit type called health. I got dental. I'm not going to get more complicated than that just because I don't have much time, but you can have 10 steps if you need to. There's no limit on the number of steps, and you can order them right here. So health is going to be first, dental is second. I can rearrange them using these little arrows over here, and I can remove them with a little trash can to delete, and I can add a new one. What does it look like in a step? So this is what medical looks like as an example. First off, the name. Now the name doesn't need to match the type. So medical step, it could be called medical, it could be called health plans, whatever you may want to call that. Here is the plan that I've selected. So I have the basic plan and a more advanced plan, and I can add other types of health plans. I'm only going to see plans that are health plans, and I can add them in there. So you may remember I had, 20 different benefit plans, but I'm only seeing a subset of those because these are the ones that are health. All right, and then if I want a description, the description shows at the top of the step. So you might want to have maybe a little comparison or links or stuff like that, images. You can type that up here. So I'm going to just type in some sample description, right? And then let me just do a link to Google. All right, so google.com. All right, so there you can see. I could do like an image. If I had an image, I could put that in there. And other things, you'll see these are the same type of formatting that I could do on other stuff. Just show you an example there. All right, and then once you've done with this one, go ahead and hit save. And I can do the same thing in dental. I'm not going to bother, but it's the same steps. All right, then I get to the last step, which is auto rollover. You may want this to say, all right, if somebody doesn't go through enrollment, they're eligible for enrollment, but they don't go through it, what do we do with their existing plans? So you can come over here and say, all right, for an example, this basic medical plan, if so-and-so doesn't go through it, they're going to get re-enrolled back into the basic medical plan. And so I would select the options that exist and say, all right, if they have employee only, where does it go? It goes to employee only. Employee spouse goes to spouse, child goes to child, family goes to family, right? And I can set up those different options for how that gets carried over from one plan year to the next. If I don't select it, there's no carryover. So anybody in this plan, it would just expire it. Anybody in the, these would just expire. So that's what that does right there. You do need to configure each one as you set them up. And I can go ahead and save that. Now that I've saved it and it's in between those dates, it's actually ready to go in self-service. So let me go over here to self-service, and I should, hopefully, crossing my fingers, see my open enrollment. Good thing. All right, so let's go through this very quickly here. I only have a couple more minutes. Here is that text. I think somebody asked, can you preview it? This is where you would preview it. Unfortunately, not really able to preview it in the system. That is what you saw previously. Unfortunately, this box is a little bit small, but this is the preview. You'll notice the text is the same. Unfortunately, it's a little bit small, but that is exactly what it's going to look like. What we recommend you do is you actually set it up maybe in a sandbox environment. Everybody's got a sandbox. So that way you can preview it, you can play around, or you could just set up a group that maybe just has you and a couple other HR people in it, and you assign yourselves to that group, and then you're able to see it in live. And then you can always delete it or make those changes. And that way it doesn't update your exact sample system or your live system. I'm sorry. All right, but here's the welcome page. And I don't have a link here, but if I had a link, it could go off to something else. And then I'm just into my steps. So here's that sample text with a link, goes off to Google, right? Now, he's not currently enrolled in anything, so I don't see anything here. But if he was, he would be enrolled. And I would see what he had currently, if he had medical or whatever, it would show over here. Now, I do need to choose enroll here to select this. Just to give you a little sneak peek, we're going to have a release coming out here in a couple of weeks where we will have the option to make a waiver reason required. Right now, we don't have it today. We don't have that. Within a couple of weeks, we do have this. Maybe what we'll do is another open enrollment training once some of these other features. Some other stuff for open enrollment is coming out that's pretty good too. So, but this will be a field where they can choose a waiver reason. It'll be a little drop-down menu. But for today, for this purpose, it doesn't do that. Here you can see the plan. So if I choose that basic medical plan, the coverage, let's just choose employee only, and then it's showing those amounts there. In my situation, if I did like employee plus children, you'll see where I don't know, he does have some children like that, I can roll their children on there. All right, so those numbers, I'll go to dental, and let me just do this. There's a link to a document on there. Let me just keep this same thing here, and I'm going to add my dependent, my spouse. Okay. Now, I just had those two steps. There are lots more that you can do there. For an example, I can make one plan dependent on another. Maybe they choose a certain health plan and an HSA plan becomes eligible, or once they select employee life insurance, spouse life insurance becomes a plan option. Those are all in the eligibility things. And what you would do is you would work with support on getting that done. I can't cover this here in the last minute, but that's an example there. Here's a summary page showing what I've selected, what I currently had. I didn't have any medical. Here's my dental. As mentioning with the waiver, if they did do a waiver in the new version, it would show that they waived and what the reason was there. Here's a form as an example. When you filled out that dental, here's a form. Sample answer, not required. So he's filling out that form down there, and then finish. Now, when finish happens here, I'm going to have to sign it. So whatever my signature is, and I'm going to submit it, and then that's going to go for approval using the workflow that's configured. All right, so whatever that workflow is, that person is going to get an email notification to letting them know that this is out there to be approved, and they would approve it. I don't know who it is, but they would see that as an option out there to approve that. You'll see here the employee could download a summary of what they've done. So they can always come back to this and download that summary or look at this summary to figure out what's happening. If it does get rejected back to them, they can come in and make those changes. Otherwise, when it gets approved, what's going to happen is these new plans will be on the employee record with a 1/1 effective date, because that's what I said, with the new rates. And of course, if I was using payroll, the deductions and so forth would come out. So I know I was going very quickly there. I apologize. We had to go very quickly for a very complicated thing here. Obviously, if you do have any questions, we do have the Q&A. It's only going to be over for another minute or so, but please feel free to reach out to support on that. Let me switch my screen here to show our schedule of upcoming training. It also mentions the number there and the email address you can see at the bottom there for support. But coming up, because we're reaching towards the end of the year, we're going to be diving into taxes and so forth. So our next 3, and in fact, our next 4 are all about taxes. If you're not a payroll person, or you don't want to be involved with that, obviously you don't have to attend those there. But you see Canada tax year end is going to be November 15th. And then United States tax year end, that also is going to include information about Atrix. That's going to be on the 29th. We're going to have another Canadian one for people who can't make the first one on the 6th. It's going to be the same one, but you're welcome to take both. And then I didn't have room to put it on here, but a week after that, we are going to have another United States one. So December 13th, I just didn't have room for it on the slide, but we'll update it as we go along. And of course, emails are going to go out about those. So Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we get to see you again in a couple of weeks. Otherwise, have a great year end. We'll get back to our HR stuff in January.